Breaking tonight, eyewitnesses to the deadly Benghazi terror attacks finally get their chance to speak 14 months after lawmakers first requested to speak with them. 4 Americans died in Benghazi, Libya that night. Just this week, Congress getting the chance to interview 5 CIA eyewitnesses in closed-door sessions. Now in an exclusive interview, Republican Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers joins me. He's chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, which is leading this investigation. Mr. Chairman, great to see you.
Great to see you, Megyn. And by the way, congratulations on your show.
Thank you, sir. It's great to have you here. I want to ask you, let's just go through it piece by piece so the viewers can follow us. First of all, I want to ask you whether you believe it took 14 months to get these witnesses in front of you. You were stonewalled in getting access to them.
You know, and I don't, and let me tell you why. So we had a good base of interviews from the FBI who interviewed them fairly shortly, not as close to the event as I would have liked, but very close to the event. So we had this base of interviews that we were using to try to determine what leadership discrepancies were in what events happened on the ground. And at some point, it worked to the logical point where we needed to bring the actual on-the-ground witnesses in, even after they had already been interviewed by the FBI, so that we would have at least some base and some comparisons to see where the discrepancies were and where the investigation should go next.
Okay. One of the big issues in this attack is whether the fighting that was going on there was constant or whether there was a lull in the fighting. The reason that's relevant is because the State Department did not send the counterterrorism team. There was a counterterrorism team here stateside that could have been dispatched and is normally dispatched in incidents such as these, but was not dispatched. And one of the explanations we've been given from the administration for the decision not to send that team is, well, the attack, we kind of thought it was over. You know, it happened, it was done. And some have said that's not true. The fighting was ongoing. There was no good reason for them not to send that team. Do you believe that the fighting was ongoing that night? Or do you believe, as the administration has claimed, there were 2 waves? The second attack at the annex came much later and it wasn't this ongoing thing.
Well, by the testimony we received over the last few days, compared by the testimony that was taken earlier, and it does sync up, it was clear to me that there was intervals of lulls in the fighting, including a 3-hour block of a lull in the fighting. But here's what I think. Well, the very last wave, about 2:30 to 5:30, that last wave that happened about 5:30, there was a lull in the fighting, and in between that. So, and remember, there was several different stages of this. One was at where the ambassador was.
Compound started 9:30
the guys
to 10:30-ish.
on the ground. Yeah, and by the way, the guys on the ground, heroes. These guys, we should all be taking our hats off, patting them on the back for huge courage to leave the annex, to go over and rescue those folks on the temporary mission facility. So that is beyond question.
And just to refresh our viewers, so they're with us, the original compound where the ambassador was attacked around sometime after 9:30, and the guys who were at the annex, CIA annex, came over to try to save him. They get there, he's missing,
right.
They can't find him, they get some people and they bring him back to the CIA annex, but at the time the ambassador was still missing. So you're talking about how the guys who went are heroes, and the first wave of attack took place at the compound. Go.
Great. And second wave at the annex, but that happened about 45 minutes roughly after they got back. Then you have another lull in the fighting, and there was another attack, and then it appears that the mortar attack happened finally, and that was some hours later.
Okay, but let me ask you this, because Congressman Nunes,
Megyn.
I'm going to give you the floor in 1 second, but Congressman Nunes came on special report yesterday, and he suggested, because he's in the same hearings you are, there was no lull in the fighting, which would be worse for the administration given the story it's been telling us. Let's listen to him.
Is that your impression now of what happened? That there were these 2 separate attacks with an hours-long lull in between?
Well, there is conflicting testimony, and I will tell you this, that I believe the survivors.
And the survivors tell you what? That it was more constant?
I don't think it ever stopped.
Why are you guys disagreeing?
Well, you know, you're a former attorney. Sometimes someone can see the same event and see 3 different things. So the good news is we have the transcripts. We will sit down again next week, go over all the transcripts, and we filled in all the gaps. That's why this part of it was so important. You know, you're a recovering attorney yourself. You know that you have to establish the record so that you have things to compare it with. So that's really why this was a very, very important part of a very long investigation, at least on the intelligence side of it. And by the way, we've done more hearings hearings than we've done anything else in intelligence since the Benghazi attacks. This has been a serious effort by the
It's just strange to hear
committee.
two guys from the same party in the same hearing seeing something
No,
so different.
I understand.
But listen, let me ask you this, because there's a lot I want to cover with you, and we don't have a lot of
Yeah.
time. There's an allegation that these men, these CIA operatives, were forced to sign, or forced, whatever, to sign non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements,
Right.
which the accusation is that would be highly unusual for them to be asked to do that because these CIA guys have to sign that at the beginning of their employment. There's no reason to turn around and ask them to sign that again. And the suggestion is they were asked to do it at the memorial service for the guys who died in the Benghazi terror attacks, that there, at that memorial service, they say, hey, can you sign another one? And that they did it. Is that true?
It appears that they did, in fact, sign a non-disclosure agreement on the date of which they returned to the agency. Now, there's 3 people that have been interviewed, or 4, candidly, that had to sign non-disclosure agreements. There's an explanation for all but 1, and that's certainly something that came out in the hearings here that we're going to have to go back and ask some further questions on. We have to remember, these folks are dispersed all over the world, and the administrative things that they have to do every time there's a change in their agreement. There's rule requirements that they have to sign another one. Sometimes it happens candidly, and sometimes it doesn't.
Come on.
Well,
they come
I'm just
back,
saying
and on the day of the Benghazi memorial service,
clearly,
with non-disclosure agreements already in place, they're asked to sign one. I mean, that doesn't pass the smell test.
Well, no, it doesn't. And unfortunately, there are reasons to sign it, but there are also, it doesn't pass the smell test that it happened on the day that they came back. That's the one discrepancy that came out of all of this testimony that will require further probing by the committee, and that is ongoing. Matter of fact, we had some meetings subsequent to that on that particular issue. But let me tell you one thing, Megyn, that I think gets missed in this. We've spent a lot of time on the time frame and a few minutes difference between the team leaders on the ground and maybe the guys on the ground, and there was a 15, and then we spent a whole year worried about that 8 or 9 or 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to spend some time. The non-disclosure agreement, I do think, is a substantive issue. But here's the problem. The agency folks on the ground told the State Department people on the ground, if you guys behave the way you do now, you are going to die here in Benghazi. That's a problem. And so they knew it. They requested up through the State Department for additional both armament and additional security services that was denied. So, and here's the other thing that came out of this that I thought, we need to get to the bottom of this. There was a posting of a threat in the area, non-specific, that the agency personnel received leading up to the event. So think about this. You had the agency personnel were on high alert. They understood that 9/11, they had a generalized threat. Why didn't the State Department know? Why didn't they react to this higher threat environment? And why didn't they honor the request by the security guys on the ground at the temporary mission facility supposed to guard the ambassador? They ignored all of that. Wow. So the problem here, we're going to spend a lot of time fighting about the few minutes or what happened with the CIA officials on the ground.
Well,
we
it's
have run
relevant
every
because
lead to the ground.
if the State Department didn't send help, that people want to know why. But listen,
huge.
I
That's
gotta
a
go,
huge
but
problem.
Can I ask you very quickly? Is it a fact that Ambassador Stevens spoke to your committee prior to his murder?
Ambassador Stevens did spend some time with our committee prior to his passing.
That's significant. You don't normally have ambassadors to Libya speaking to the House Intel Committee, and that lays the foundation so the viewers understand for yet another question we should be asking about why he wasn't better protected and why he was even at that consulate on the 9/11 anniversary. Mr. Chairman, you're a good man to come on. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Megyn.
All right, all the best. Still more questions than answers. It's yet another story that people say, it's just a Fox story. It's not, don't pay any attention there. Really? Like Obamacare? Coming up, one of the architects of Obamacare joins me live, and I'm going to ask him what's going to happen to the more than 5 million people who had their insurance canceled and now are in insurance limbo.
And just give them the basics,